Cool, thank you. Okay. So right. So the topic I thought I would talk about is what basically the some recent thoughts on the future of Ethereum scaling, and and I think what is the right approach to start thinking about these things, especially as we get into some pretty significant discussions in terms of scaling blobs in Petra, and then in Fusaka later in the year, some L1 improvements. A lot of these discussions about L2 interoperability, and like all of these things that have been hot topics for us in the last few months. So I published this post this morning, right? And the topic of the post is basically an argument for why there's value in having some higher gas limits, even on layer one, even in a world where most applications or most application activity ends up happening on layer two. And so the core argument that I made, right, is basically that I've been going through some individual things that the L1 provides, and things like individual reasons why users might need to use the L1 in certain circumstances, and basically doing the math and asking, well, how much L1 scaling would actually be needed if basically the whole world was on Ethereum to make all of these things possible and make them affordable, right? So first one here is censorship resistance, right? So censorship resistance, basically, if your transaction is valid and you have the funds to pay a market rate gas fee, you should be able to reliably get your transaction included on chain, right? Now, in some cases, I think this is something that's really important to remember in terms of censorship resistance, right? That you might need it even on very short time scales. So for example, if you have a position in a DeFi protocol and prices are changing quickly, then you might need to quickly add more to your position. And if that gets delayed by even 5 minutes, then there is a risk that you're going to get liquidated, right? So censorship resistance, even at short time scales, is something that's valuable. And there's a lot of different reasons why someone using the blockchain might fear censorship. And it's important for L1 censorship resistance to not just be a theory, but also to be a reality, including being a reality for users, right? So on L2, one of the main mechanisms for censorship resistance is this forced inclusion mechanism, right? Where basically users are able to submit transactions directly through the L1, and those transactions are guaranteed to go through, even if the L2 sequencer doesn't want to, right? It's literally not valid for the L2 sequencer to make a block past some certain delay. So for example, in Optimism, the delay is 30 minutes. That does not include transactions that have been submitted on L1. Now, one important practical point, of course, is that for a user to actually use this guarantee, well, the user needs to send a transaction on L1, and the user needs to pay fees on L1. And so starting to do some of the math around this, right? So some of the mathematical assumptions that I decided to take and reuse, one is that L1 to L2 deposit transactions take a bit more than 100,000 gas. There's a link to a specific one. If you try to do something like very ultra minimal, like if you just want to change one record on chain, then I'm saying it's about 7,500 gas. So it's a cold S-Store plus called data plus a bit more. Price of ETH is about 2,500. Gas price is about 15 GUI, which is roughly the long-term average. Demand elasticity is close to 1. So if you double the gas limit, that makes everything 2 times cheaper. So this is not mathematically obvious, but it's something that's like weakly supported by some previous data. And generally, like if you know nothing about an economy, then a demand elasticity of 1 is like generally safer to assume than any other number. And so, but we should note that there's like a lot of uncertainty here, right? And also from a cost perspective, like we want normal operations to cost like less than 5 cents, responding to attacks to cost less than 1, things that are exceptional but not too exceptional, somewhere in the middle. And like, this is an intuitive value judgment, right? So that's important to highlight that we're being pretty approximate here, right? And so if we use these numbers, then if we calculate, well, what is the cost of a bypass operation? Today, it's going to be about $4.5, right? And so if we're saying we want to, even for a user to respond to an attack, to be able to pay less than $1, then like the argument is that we have to scale L1 by about 4.5x, right? So that's censorship resistance. Now, another example is moving assets between L2s, right? So if you're moving commonly used tokens, so for example, big ERC20s, ETH, then the most practical way for regular users is intent protocols like ERC-7683. And so only a small market makers actually do direct movements. Everyone else just trades against them. But then for low value assets, and especially for NFTs, you can't use intent protocols, right? Like you can't, like if you have one specific NFT, like you can't have a market maker that has another copy of that specific NFT on the other chain that they can front you, because there only is one copy, right? And so you have to just actually move the copy. And so to do that, individuals have to send transactions through L1, right? And so if you calculate how much this does today, you can calculate how much it does in a kind of very crazy optimized setup. That's about 7,500 gas. And so if you calculate the cost on both sides, then you get to about like basically somewhere between 28 cents and $13, depending on which assumptions you're using, right? And then if you want to analyze based on capacity, you could assume, well, what if a user needs to do a cross L2 transfer an NFT once a month? And we assume that Ethereum is going to get as many users as Facebook, then it has to expand capacity by about 6x. And, that's even if we use something like the ideal design, right? And that's if this is the only thing that L1 is for. L2 mass exits, so this is an important one, right? So the big difference between an L2 and any other chain is that if the L2 breaks, you need to be able to move things to the L1. And so like we need to calculate, well, what is the cost of actually doing that? Can all the users of an L2 actually do that within a week? And is it affordable, right? And so if you do the math on that, you realize that today, present day or ideal cost for an exit would be, again, somewhere between 28 cents and $4.5. But then if the costs go high, like if everyone exits at the same time, gas fees are going to go higher. And so like basically you get numbers that suggest that like, well, L1 needs to scale by a factor of like somewhere between 1 and 9. If you think about issuing ERC20s, right? So today, a lot of ERC20s are launched on L2, and arguably launching ERC20s on L1 is actually the safer thing, right? And because if an ERC20 launches on L2, if there's a hostile governance upgrade on that L2, then like basically whoever takes over the governance would be able to launch an unlimited number of new tokens, and those tokens would just spread through the rest of the ecosystem, right? So if a token is issued on L1, then that becomes safer. And so today, like launching, for example, the railway token, it costs about $60. And in principle, you can optimize it quite a bit. For meme coins, obviously meme coins are just a token. They have no extra logic, and so it should be cheap. Although, interestingly enough, I actually went and checked Mudeng, and it turns out that the transaction that launched the Mudeng token actually spent 3 million gas, so the equivalent of over $100 to launch. So, sometimes things are not that optimized and not that trivial, right? Now, there are applications where ERC20s just get launched very frequently, right? So if, for example, we want to bring Polymarket to L1, and we want to see lots of markets happening, then, well, maybe the cost of making a market should cost less than 25 cents. If we want that, then L1 has to get about 18 times bigger. Key store wallets, right? So this is a type of wallet where the wallet data, verification logic, public key, and so on gets stored on L1, and then it can be read by L2s, and you can estimate the cost of a key store operation. There's this technique from Scroll that basically allows key store operations to be initiated by L2, but still stored on L1. And so you can optimize that all the way down to maybe 7,500 gas, and if the cost about 28 cents. And so, our target is 25 cents, and so we're almost there. And so maybe increase it by a little bit, right? But then if you look at L2 proof submission, right? So, we want L2s to be able to submit proofs quickly, because the faster L2s submit proofs, the faster you can have trustless interoperability between them. And then currently the long-term average gas price is about currently the cost of submitting one proof per slot would be about $50 million a year, right? Which is crazy. Now, what we could do is if we use aggregation protocols, then you would only have to do storage operation, and then the cost would only be $1 million a year. And then I argue, well, maybe if we actually want to be affordable, well, we want this closer to 100K a year, right? Like in my experience talking to these teams, 1 mil a year is a number that a lot of people complain about. 100K a year is not, right? And so if you look at the conclusion here, basically, even from the perspective of users' needs in an L2 dominated world, there's actually quite a lot of benefit to L1 scaling a moderate amount, right? And the basic principle here, again, right, is if you just zoom out a bit, what we're trying to do is we're trying to ensure that each user of Ethereum is able to use the L1 at least occasionally, right? And we're saying, well, let's say we want Ethereum to have as many users as Facebook. That's 3.1 billion. Then there's 31 million seconds in a year, very conveniently. And so that implies 100 transactions per second on L1. Today, we have about 15 transactions a second. So you want to scale by about 6x, right? So, and then obviously, potentially, you might want to do transactions more often than once a year. So with that kind of reasoning, there is still value in increasing the L1 to some extent, right? So this is just a very, a very recent piece of analysis, right? One thing that I think is really valuable to kind of dig a bit deeper and zoom out on is basically if we're going to do things like optimize the L1, potentially optimize L2 execution as well, especially the L1, because with the L1, it's so much easier to make mistakes. Then I think the important thing to start with is having a clear understanding of what our underlying goals are with L1, right? So with so for example, right, the big reason why historically we don't just bump up the limit by 100x is decentralization, right, and safety and all of these reasons. And what we want to do, I think, is we want to actually define some of those properties, right? We want to get to a situation where instead of having this religious war where one side says, hey, we need to scale, the other side says, hey, decentralization is good, and there's no actual numbers involved, and so you can basically have pretty much the exact same argument at 30 million gas versus 3 million gas versus 300 million gas. We want to put some parameters and say, well, what are the specific forms of decentralization that we're risking, right? And so there is an EIP, I forget the number, it's in progress, trying to define the desired technical characteristics of an Ethereum L1 node, right? And so I think doing that is really good, right? And obviously, ultimately, you have to expand this kind of thing out even further, right? So in Ethereum, we're going to have multiple classes of nodes. There is nodes that verify, which in the limit are going to just do ZK snarks. Then you have nodes that participate in choosing transactions. You have nodes that are staking and attesting. Then you have full nodes that are reading the chain. Potentially you have obviously block building nodes, right? And it's okay to require different levels of capacity for each one, right? But it's valuable to really think rigorously about, well, look, what are the properties that we're trying to go for, and what properties are we trying to demand of specific types of nodes, right? So I could give a concrete example. So if you think about stateless clients, right? So this is Merkle Trees or some of the newer binary ideas. Basically, the idea in all of these cases is that you change the tree structure and you make it possible for each, even regular staking clients to not require any hard drive space, and instead they're just downloading blocks, right? So, okay, now here's the thing. Before, you had a or hard disk requirement of, like, right now, a full node is like somewhere between 1 and 1.5 terabytes, right? If now after EIP 4444, that goes down to about 0.5 gigabyte, right? And then if you increase the gas limit, maybe that goes up again, right? So before statelessness, that same level of storage applies to all full Ethereum nodes, applies to anyone who is staking, and it applies to anyone who is block building, and it applies to whoever is generating proofs, right? Now, suppose you add in statelessness. If you add in statelessness, then you're suddenly making the requirements diverge, right? You're saying if you're just attesting, then your storage requirements go down to potentially very close to 0 if we also push EIP 4444 further, right? But if you're a block builder and then we use statelessness as a reason to increase the gas limit, then the storage requirements for a builder go up, right? And so it's like before, a tester is over here, and then builders over here, and then after a tester is here, builders here, right? And then the question is, well, if this situation is okay, is this situation okay, right? And by default, you kind of don't know, right? By default, it's like, well, we're basically trading off one type of decentralization versus another type of decentralization. And often people have these very different intuitive ideas in their heads. And to some people, it's okay if building is very centralized as long as anyone can verify. And then for other people, it's like, well, actually, yeah, being able to build a block in a decentralized way is something that's crazy important as well. And then the question is, well, what if we manage to separate building from computing state roots? Then what happens, right? And then that gets into a whole other discussion, right? So these are the kinds of things that were basically mean that there's a lot of benefit to actually defining these kinds of properties, right? So defining, what is the acceptable level of disk requirements, compute requirements for one type of node, for another type of node. One other thing to think about is the whole censorship resistance topic, right? So basically today, Ethereum is designed around this world where, or not designed around, it's living in this world where internet is relatively easy to access. There's not that much actual censorship happening. Probably the biggest risk is that if you over-optimize for staking nodes that are in New York, then it's hard to realize, but actually there's a lot of people who are staking in a lot of different regions. Sometimes it's not even actually rich versus poor country. That's the bigger divide. It's actually urban versus rural, right? And if you're in a rural environment, even in the UK, for example, right, it's often surprisingly hard to get a very fast internet connection, right? And so the risk you have today is if you over-optimize for stakers in New York, then maybe you're going to make it unfriendly for people to solo stake if they're in some rural environments, right? But then even that is in the context of censorship and of not actually being a very big issue right now, right? But then in the future, if internet becomes less friendly or if the internet becomes disrupted for whatever reason, then, well, actually, we need to be able to handle more adverse situations, right? And so basically, one of the conclusions that you can have here, I think, is that it's probably safer to rely on compute than it is to rely on bandwidth. And the reason is that if someone has, but bandwidth is much easier to take away than compute is, right? If someone has some amount of bandwidth, then that connection might be shut down. You might have extra conditions added to that condition because of some complicated global situation. That connection might disappear, or it might become less effective. But generally, if you already have a computer, then you will continue to have that computer, right? And so this, to me, is an underrated argument for like actually being more okay with higher compute requirements and less okay with high bandwidth requirements, which is a little bit the opposite direction of where we've been going recently, right? Because if you think about like statelessness, for example, it's basically saying, well, we're trying to minimize compute and we're okay with relatively higher bandwidth, right? Although with zero knowledge proofs replacing witnesses, bandwidth also gets to go back down somewhat, right? And so to me, these are the kinds of things that I think would be valuable for the Ethereum ecosystem to try to become more rigorous about, right? Which is basically, what are the actual nodes that we're optimizing around? What kinds of things do we want different types of users to be able to do? What types of guarantees do we want L1 to be able to provide? And once we have a much better of understanding of these types of numbers from both directions, then I think it becomes much easier, first of all, to say, well, one, like how much is it okay to increase L1 gas limits, and two, what other changes on the L1 are and are not okay in order to make that happen. And then as a result of that, then the question becomes, well, also, what are the different things that Ethereum needs to expect from its L2s? So, this is where I expect a lot of the discussion over the next year to be. So, thank you.
Sorry, everybody clapped, but I don't think you heard that. What you can do? Questions time. If you have questions, you can just come over here and ask him so that he can hear you.
Could we also get like what is his impression of Zugrama units?
Oh yeah, I think so. One request was if you were able to give some feedback on Zugrama too. Maybe after the questions on this, we could do that.
I mean, honestly, this is also the thing that I wanted to ask some of you, right? Because for me, I've obviously dialed into a couple of presentations, and I was able to see the audience, and it feels like you guys actually have a pretty significant group both at the beginning and at the end. So it looks like the thing stuck all the way through, which is very positive. But like, I'm more curious what your response is. Is this an experience you enjoyed? Is this something where you were able to learn some significant things you would not have otherwise learned? Are there any projects that started as a result of Zugrama and that are going to continue from here? So, any answers?
Hi, Vitalik. I'm Dr. Sabia Bani. This is my first pop-up city, and I'm a resident of India. And I've been here the entire 6 weeks. It has been a transformative learning journey, and it has felt like my brain has gotten that stimulation in this like very intellectually charged environment that it hasn't gotten in the past couple of years. And one of the projects that I'm trying to build out with a couple of people is focused on organ regeneration. So I don't think that would have been possible if I had not come to Zugrama. So
okay, I'm curious, what kind of organs are you thinking of regenerating?
So this one's I'm trying to take a more universal approach to the regeneration of all organs, and I've discussed with someone who has a company here in India that we're trying to take a similar matrix, like an extracellular matrix that's needed as a scaffold for all organs, and use certain developmental biology cues that are important, that are essentially encoded from fertilization onwards, and use some of those cues to help regenerate these organs. Because there's no point in taking organs from very aged individuals and transplanting those if you don't have a way to like either remove damaged cells, or if you don't have a way to extend the function of those particular organs. So it's a general approach. But we have some pretty good ideas, and yeah. So then we'll see.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
By the way, can I just like make a quick poll before doing any more like long form questions? So for people working on things, who here is doing things that are bio-related? How many? About okay. Doing things that are Ethereum related. Not Ethereum, but otherwise computer software or hardware. Specifically hardware. Okay, I think hardware is important. I mean, by the way, I think this is like very far away, but like what sort of potential kind of India feedback, right? But because I think there might be value in like you guys doing more open hardware. And one of the reasons why I'm saying this is because like in some of my Balvi efforts, we put like this is some of the anti-COVID stuff. We gave about $15 million to an Indian group to make vaccines, and they were able to like make very impressive vaccines. Actually, a lot of them open source at a cost of like 10 times lower than what other people were expecting, right? And so, like possibly there's and I know that you know some of you guys are doing like open source e-government stuff, which is amazing. And so I think you know hardware is one of those spaces that like we're scared of, but at the same time it's like that's exactly the reason why it's so valuable. So I mean, like I don't know how much that makes sense, but maybe worth thinking about.
Hi Vitalik, my name is Madhu, and for me this was a great learning experience in the way I'm not native to Web3 or Ethereum, and so I live in a forest and I work with fasting protocols for mood and longevity. So coming from a very analog space and being able to engage with so many people from different technologies, I think I really enjoyed that, and I'm happy that there was that openness for people to come from different fields and make me kind of also feel very. I've been feeling for a long time that our conventional educational systems are like fossil fuels and dinosaurs, and this is something. This is something which is a very cool and very good alternative, and I'm very excited about more semi-permanent and permanent places where people can move through. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey Vitalik, my name is Alicia.
Hi.
I would like to just speak a few words about Zugrama a bit and then speak about what we're building from here. Is that okay? So I came to Zugrama after having traveled multiple disciplines in life, and to me, to come here and to see that there is an intention to foster various fields and bring them together and in depth has been very stimulating. So I leave from here wanting to code again, which is a huge win for me as someone who stopped coding about a decade ago. So yay. And one thing which inspired me, having worked in science previously, was there was an experiment which was being run within the community on gut microbiome. And then we were like, hey, hang on, we can emulate this sort of experiments in different spaces, given zoo villages are a great controlled environment. And we can run community-led experiments, connecting researchers, funders, and communities together in controlled environment. And that is something which take as an exit from here. And and I'm very glad that this sort of community-based thinking was inspired by the first supervision. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Vitalik. Nice to meet you again.
Mhm.
This is my third pop-up city, and so there was this idea me and a friend had that really got fruition and like kickstart at Zugrama because of the environment of building for long term. So the idea was basically, the thing is that trust has some positive externalities in markets, in governance, but once you come to the on-chain world, there's no trust primitive anymore. So things like bloodlines or same communities is not really reflected on-chain. So the idea was how there's a on-chain programmable trust primitive. So how would that be possible? So the simple idea was we use like a game theory to approach this, some sort of prisoner's dilemma, whereby I have a bond with a partner and I have three choices. One is that if I put money or stake with my partner, I am participating with him, trying to increase our trust score. Or the second thing is that my partner could take my stake or break the bond, that is steal my funds. And the third thing is that both of us would just mutually decide to exit from the game. So this concept, let's amplify it, let's add social graphs to it, let's add transitive trust, whom do I may have a bond with whom, and let's see if we can create this digital first chain on trust primitive, whereby I could look at a wallet address, I could look at the DAO, I could look at an ENS, and I could have some sort of trust assumption with it. So how could this, redefine POM.1? How could it redefine other DAOs? How could it redefine grant speaking system? And so we're also coming up with like a white paper on how can this be some sort of deterministic trust and what is the best way to model it. We're looking at game theories or Monte Carlo simulations to see what best values could be assigned to trust score with. So yeah, we call it the trust with fall.
Okay, yeah, fascinating.
Yes.
Hey Vitalik, Abhishek here. Nice to meet you again after Bangkok. Yeah, so last time when we met at Bangkok, we had a chat around privacy and FHE. This time I wanted to ask you about, recently I saw a tweet of you being joined on Kaito. So what's your view on Kaito and them airdropping to top influencers, and should the data be verifiable like the apps and so what's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I intentionally did anything to join Kaido, right? They just like put me on there. But yeah, I mean, this stuff is challenging, right? Because it's like whenever you take something that was intrinsically motivated before and that you just like slap an extrinsic incentive on top of it, then like that often interferes with the existing incentive in complicated ways. It often creates more activity, but at the same time, it creates a different type of activity, right? And so in like the ideal goal of these kinds of things, right, I think is, I mean, it's the same as the ideal goal of like the payout mechanism that's like built into Twitter or built into YouTube, right? Which is basically, yeah, I mean, like if someone like makes a living out of producing great content, then they should be compensated for it. And like you want content creators, like you don't want to have this kind of like very harsh divide where people are either working for free or they're like full-time professionals. You want people that are kind of professional, but also still like grassroots, right? And that's like the good part. The negative part is basically that if the thing that you reward is like misaligned from the thing that people actually want, and it's like actually valuable for the community, right? Then like you might end up incentivizing the wrong thing, right? This is how, like the thing that often people reward is like engagement, because engagement is easy to measure. But then if you get engagement, then like often you get like negative engagement, right? And like people already talk about, engagement farming being this bad thing, right? And so, yeah, I mean, like what I would be really interested in is basically coming up with what are ways to try to encourage like getting the thing you want, but then avoiding the things that we don't want, and then at the same time also making sure that you're not like accidentally overriding like an intrinsic motivation that people already have.
Yeah, true. I do agree with your point that it's just like another X payments or Twitter payments, you say, just like incentivizing the influencers, top KOLs who are reaching engagements. And even I saw like recently my tweet, a 2-line tweet on Succinct Labs, and it got around 20K views, found 10 years unintentionally, but it had no meaning. And at the same time, when I had to put some educational threads on FHE or be any tech, it doesn't get that kind of reach or that kind of sort of reach part. That's on Twitter, but it doesn't get that kind of value that a protocol should be giving. So you see there are protocols like Parachain or other protocols. They just use Kaito's algorithm to airdrop users based on like talking about their mind share. So
Right.
that's what point I feel.
Right. Yeah. I agree. This is also a concern, right? Like I think, one concern is sort of concerns that you get when Twitter is like making an algorithm for the benefit of Twitter. But then like you get this whole other level when people are kind of slapping third-party mechanisms on top, right? And I mean, there's definitely like a sense in which it's sort of information warfare, right? Like, you might literally imagine, I mean, in the limits, like even like a competitor to Twitter could potentially make a Kaido like bribing mechanism, right? And just like literally bribe people to be as toxic as possible, and that would benefit them, right? And so it's yeah, I mean, these things kind of worry me, right? It's basically, like I feel like for the last 5 to 10 years, like I've written a bunch of these long blog posts talking about why like bribery is not actually economically efficient, and like why bribery is actually dangerous, and like why it's correct for like people like governments to try to ban it. But the challenge is now with the internet, so we just have like such crazy efficient finance. We have such crazy efficient like social media, and all of these things intersect, right? And so all of these mechanisms, they intersect with each other, right? The other one now is that there's this thing, I think Lobbyfy was the name, where you can basically like pay people to vote in a particular direction on a DAO proposal. And so like everything turns into an auction. Like basically it's like you can convert any type of influence into any other type of influence, right? I mean, to me, like even like Trump coin is an example of that, right? And like this creates it's like a much more challenging level of like grounds for all of these protocols and mechanisms that basically run our governance and culture to actually be stable on top of it. So yeah, I mean, we need to like think harder about how we deal with these things.
Cool.
Hey Vitalik, I'm Adnan, and my second pop-up city. So I've been a ZK dev for more than 2 years now, and what I think about the whole ZK space right now is if you take apart the ZK rollups, right? So we don't have many action on the ZK apps right now. So there are some of my friends out here, and we tried to fix this particular thing with ZK. So we wanted to basically onboard all the normal like smart contract devs and all the Rust devs into the ZK ecosystem. Already ZK VMs are working on that, so you can write Rust code and try to prove it. But we wanted to make it more streamlined. So what we did is we built kind of a wrapper for state machine. So the normal devs, they don't need to focus anything about ZK. They don't need to understand about ZK VM, pre-compiles, TSLs, anything. They just need to write their particular state machine logic, and we'll be able to connect them with proven networks, verified networks. So kind of an end-to-end ZK system. So yeah, that's the whole idea. What do you think of this? You're in mute.
I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. No, I thought that says. I mean, I did. Sorry. Could you just like explain again in one sentence? Like,
Yeah, so kind of a state machine wrapper for ZK views, where the
okay.
developer don't need to know anything about ZK. They just need to write the normal logic, and we will be
Sorry,
able
a
to
state.
give them.
Okay, so a state machine wrapper around ZK VMs, meaning like, do you mean something like the RISC-0 effort, or do you mean like something else?
Yeah, so it's kind of a wrapper. You can wrap it whether on RISC-0 or ST, any of those ZK views.
Mm. Yeah, and so to me, one of the big valuable things to do around ZK VMs is like standardization, right? And like RISC-V is, I think, one good example of that, and another example of that is like creating a very simple language within which different types of proof systems can be expressed, right? So I think you need both. You need the language inside the VM, you need the language, or inside the proving system, you need the language for the proving systems. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more you can standardize, I think it's like much better for security and potentially for efficiency as well.
Got it. Makes sense.
Hi, Vitalik. Ziz here. We had a quick chat at Zoo Talent, and I asked you what's very important to ask founders when they're building something valuable for the ecosystem. And you said it's very important to know how they're making money. And here I was brainstorming in Zugrama, what is the best way to enter the market and solve a real problem? And I think there's a huge problem. Everybody is trying to solve and propose banks on chain, but nobody is solving the cash problem. In the Levant region, in Latin America, there's a lot of physical cash, and many people that are not very educated on how to use on chain, that still need the bridge from physical cash to actual crypto. So we proposed one protocol, which is ZK P2P marketplace, where you can go to merchants and give them cash, and they will give you back crypto to your wallet. I'm finding difficulty here in terms of how do we ensure the security of our stakeholders, because there's physical interaction coming in place. So yes, the idea is good. There's a lot of cash that needs to be bridged straight to crypto. That's the essence of why crypto is here, the privacy of it. But also the difficulty here is how do we ensure the safety of our stakeholders? Curious to get your thoughts on this.
Sorry, how do you ensure the safety of your stakeholders?
It's because people are going to be coming on the platform to propose to give out the cash to the merchants. Do you think this is a viable idea to actually propose to the market, or are we here proposing an opportunity of higher risk to stakeholders?
Sorry, so this is like an exchange between like a cash in, cash out kind of ramp, or I'm trying to.
If you're a convenience store and you're giving a lot of products, you can also give out crypto to the people. You have high inflated currency and you want to sell it out for people who want to use it from outside. They have crypto and they want to use their crypto to spend it in the country, but there isn't enough solutions to spend the crypto, so you need to get the cash.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, so I think. Right. So, I mean, cash in and cash out ramps are definitely important. And I think like making sure that people have multiple options is always something that's really valuable. And in terms of safety, like obviously, yeah, one of the big challenges here is basically that in any of these in-person things, the question is like, well, how trustworthy is a particular person that you're dealing with? And so you will have to like think pretty carefully about like whether it's like reputation system or whatever you want to call it that would try to handle that. I'm not sure I have excellent, very detailed answers for that, but I agree that that's the problem. I mean, the other way to get around it, of course, is to try to like focus more on the purely digital approaches, right? Because these days, like more and more countries do have like, various forms of mobile money that are more and more accessible to people.
Okay, I think we need to propose more data to get to actual problem. So in 6 to 12 months, we'll come visit us in Lebanon, in the zoo of Lebanon, and then we can, if you
Do we have more projects or feedback for Rama, by the way? Like, yeah.
I can also talk about your experience here as well.
So, hi, Vitalik. I'm Dhruv, currently 17 years old, probably the youngest one out here. And my experience was excellent. You were also one of my inspiration for building stuff at a young age. So I really learned a lot, and my perspective is widened because we meet a lot of people from various different uh, tracks here, and they all come to a single place and share their different perspectives. It was really helpful for me. So I'm currently building in education with AI. So like I'm building a solution to make the education delivery more effective using animations and visualizations. So I orchestrate agents and build animated videos and use 3-1 Browns library to generate visualizations. And I also wanted your thoughts on decentralized education, and because I was homeschooled, and I felt that the current education system is very centralized. You need to have a certificate from the Board of India. You need to be in the school. You can't do anything else. So I think the future is obviously going to be decentralized. And what are your views on that? Yep. I think you're muted.
Yeah, no, I think using AI for education is like super important and super valuable. So I'm glad to hear that. And I hope you enjoyed Zugrama.
Yeah, it was very good, and I made a lot of people. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Vitalik. So this is my first opportunity. I'm from India, Kolkata, and we are building an AI system that is able to automate bioinformatics workflows. So right now, biological research is divided into wet lab and dry lab. So we are trying to develop an agentic system with multiple agents, which can essentially use computational architecture on decentralized servers, so that the entire dry lab is essentially automated. So this can be essentially as a decision support system for dry lab researchers, as well as a feedback mechanism for wet lab researchers to understand what new hypotheses they can test on their animal model source. Yeah. And it was great. The Zugrama experience was great, and yeah, heads off.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Vitalik. I'm Raj. I'm building AI tutor, which saves around like 8 to 10 hours of tutor hours per week, because we have like this disappropriate ratio of teachers to student ratio. And I believe that 24-year education is very slow. So I build some kind of hardware kits where you can just learn to build your own computers, your own computer networking lab as scratch, internet at your home. And yeah, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, that's I mean, it's an extremely important problem, like as I've said. I think like there's a huge opportunity to make education, I mean, potentially many times more efficient for people, and then for that to just immediately become accessible to basically everyone in the world. At the same time, the world is just moving so quickly, and like the technologies are just like changing every year, and so I think the need for that is increasing more and more. So I'm like glad to hear that you're doing that.
Thank you.
Hi, Vitalik. I'm Kiko. I want to share my experience in Zugrama. I see it as a dynamic space of full of creative energy. And this space, you look at different pop-up cities like emerging and going out and like re-emerging. It's like a dynamic space moving across this physical universe, also like the digital space. And what was more interesting was after I met a lot of people with all these creative potential and who wants to build stuff, right? Now I feel I have made friends, and I also feel like a sense of citizenship in this decentralized future. Like everyone wants to build, everyone wants to create something, and they want to give away, right? It's not just about like taking from the system, but also to give to the system for the collective future. And that is the kind of energy that I really enjoyed here. And moreover, right now, after going through this week, I feel like I made friends and families. I feel like we all have this, one country which works for this decentralized, aims for this decentralized future. And I also need to thank people, who help organize this, and people who fill the space with a lot of ideas and energy and generosity. So yeah, I want to thank people. And an interesting thing that happened for me personally, and also for this from the Zugramas, we did this microbiome experiment, as someone already mentioned. And looking at this, kind of bottom-up approach to do science, a lot of other pop-up villages are like now coming up, showing interest that we want to do experimentation on this. Infinita City showed interest that they want to do something like this, and Switzerland also wants to do an experimentation. And it feels like things are moving in a decentralized fashion. And while I was discussing with people here, I just felt this was going to create a new rift in the scientific ecosystem where science will be deinstitutionalized. People will be, experimenting on stuff which would answer their curiosity, and also, collective human intelligence and human prosperity. So thanks everyone, and you or everyone who supported building this Zugrama or the Zuzalu as a concept. I'm really proud of this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey Vitalik, I'm Pratik. I'm resident of India, and this is my first Zuzalu or sort of Zugrama that I've been to, and for me it has been a wonderful experience. Especially I felt like I was being siloed and working around just computers, but coming over here has given me a lot of insights and got an opportunity to work on various different products which are not specifically into computer science, but it uses computers around for the benefits. So I have contributed to a few projects. Looking forward to continue and work on them. And I would really like to thank all the organizers and initiators for this program, and for giving us such a beautiful experience.
Thank you.
Hi, Vitalik. First of all, I'm going to talk about the fact that I spoke to Vitalik today for the rest of the year. Hi, I'm Salman. I actually have I have been very fascinated by Zuzalus ever since you first introduced it in Montenegro, and then following what is happening in the space. Except that I've never visited one. So here at Zugrama, just in my neighborhood, I found an opportunity to come join this. And my thinking was, how can I first of all find out what's happening over here? How can I get involved? How can I contribute and be of value? And I try to do that through a technology that I'm deeply familiar with, which is POAPs. So during this entire 6 weeks, I've been proactively creating a lot of POAPs for different experiences. Zugrama has been really amazing because a lot of ground-up initiatives that have been organized, and a lot of emergent leadership that you can find from within this community, and a lot of that is totally captured on chain on Ethereum through more than 30 POAPs, about 40 POAPs that are currently already there on a single page. You can look at that, and you can look at all the the artworks also represent a lot of the ongoing themes that were happening during while those were being created. And there's an on-chain snapshot data set of all the people who have engaged with different events and experiences using this technology, and a lot of pictures that have been added into these POAPs. It's pretty cool. I'm going to the community has been very accepting and very excited about technology in general, and it has allowed me to just be able to contribute in a way that is not that is fun, and would love for you to check that out.
Okay. Yeah, no, feel free to send up and pass along a link, and I'll take a look.
I'm sorry.
Oh, wow. Oh, hello.
I just want to say that Zugrama has had the best cuisine of any pop-up city. And thanks to a microbiome study, we had 3 meals a day for 4 weeks. And I'm a very happy tiger. And someday I hope to meet a zebra. So thanks, Vitalik. We love you.
Amazing. Thank you, guys.
I think those were all the
Yes.
questions
Yep.
or comments. Do you have any other for us, or maybe if you had the chance to read the
I mean, I
microbiome?
guess maybe I mean, last question for you. When is the next one?
Yeah. I think maybe in a few months' time, when we try to reflect on how all of this has gone. And I'm personally interested in looking at the counterfactuals of whether or not certain projects would come out if Zugrama did not happen. And once, it's been like I've not had the time to like reflect on all the things that's been happening here, because the time just went flew past me. So once we sit down, I think we'll be able to do the next one. I think how many of you would move to Zugrama semi-permanent space if it existed? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good number.
So yeah, that's the next step.
Cool. Exciting.
Cool. Any other last comments, guys? If anyone wants to ask? Okay, somebody has a poem to read. Do you have some?
Okay. Sure.
Minutes? Okay.
All right. It would just take 15 seconds or 30 seconds. So the poem named Decentralized Dreams. We gather, no borders, no kings, no chains. Builders and thinkers rewriting the game. A ledger of trust, no gatekeepers near. Coders are compass, the future is clear. Whispers of token, words in the air. A network of minds too wild to ensnare. Proof of belief, proof of the grind. A world where value is redefined. No rulers, just rules. No masters, just code. Ideas like fire, unstoppable and bold. We fork, we merge, we break, we rebuild. A new kind of freedom, a vision fulfilled.
Nice. Amazing. Well, I'm really excited. I'm like seeing what this whole community is going to evolve into.
Thank you so much, Vitalik, for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Have a nice
too.
day.
Nice day.